Murphy's Law doesn't mean that something bad will happen. What it means is that whatever can happen will happen.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. I think it's time that we acknowledge a hero in the Idaho student murders case, don't you? Well, what about Murphy, Kaylee's Goldendoodle? That dog totally foiled the criminal mastermind's master plan. And actually, it's not even a dog, it's a puppy. Murphy only turned 1 year old in December, about 2 weeks after the crime. Also, the word dog appears as early as page 2 in the 19-page probable cause affidavit and is referred to 5 times, 6 if we include the search warrant. If we include the animal hair that's there, it's potentially 6 references. And so in terms of the affidavit, that turns out to be almost 1 reference for every 4 pages. In fact, Kaylee's almost 1 year old Goldendoodle pup, Murphy, was right next door to the first bedroom the suspect entered, where his master was sleeping and had perhaps just been awakened. So you kind of have this weird situation where the perpetrator is headed is also someone that's very important to a little doggy person. Per the affidavit, it appears that not only Kaylee but Dee, both of them were roused not by the suspect but by Murphy moving, making noises or barking at the suspect. And this is from the affidavit. Dee stated she originally went to sleep in her bedroom on the southeast side of the second floor. That's the middle floor. Dee said she woke up at about 4 o'clock by what she said sounded like Kaylee playing with her dog in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Now, it's easy to actually get that mixed up. To say that was Dee woken up by what sounded like Kaylee. But that may not have been Kaylee. It may have been the perpetrator. But one thing we do know was the dog was part of the noise that woke Dee up, right? And it was a noise coming from one of the upstairs bedrooms located on the 3rd floor. So in other words, the story actually starts in terms of Dee's witness testimony with Murphy, with the dog. Then she says a short time later, she said she heard who she thought was Kaylee saying something to the effect of, "There's someone here." And one wonders whether Kaylee herself was awakened by her own dog, by hearing the same thing that Dee heard. Now consider this from the perspective of the carefully calculated, probably also premeditated stealth attack that was supposed to carve this person's name in stone in true crime history, in criminal history. It's going to set his legacy in stone. And so instead, it was actually not so silent from the get-go, perhaps because of an encounter with Murphy. Murphy could actually have been sleeping on a sofa in the lounge. Why on earth would they put him into a room all by himself, and possibly even an unfurnished room? Wouldn't the dog just have been comfortable in the lounge? And possibly the sounds Dee heard, sounds that sounded like playing, was actually the killer shepherding the dog, right? The dog sort of follows him, and it's kind of unexpected, right? Following him into the vacant room on the top floor. And the door's open because there's no one in there, and presumably it's a room without furniture and the door open. And so the perpetrator shepherds the dog in there and then closes the door. If this is the case, this could also account for the single animal hair reference in the search warrant, meaning this could have been a direct encounter between the perpetrator and Murphy, right? That single animal hair found at Koberger's apartment could have been as a result of a direct interaction where he shepherded the dog and literally touched the dog and sort of encouraged the dog, guided the dog into Kaylee's room. It would be interesting to know where that particular hair strand was found. Don't you agree? Now, we can take it a lot further than that, just intuiting the whole crime scene from Murphy's perspective and where that takes us. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I will be doing a special live dealing with some fresh new insights, completely new and upgraded dynamics and also changes to the timeline that you ought to find really interesting. And I'll be following that live with another live dealing with Alec Baldwin. This channel has covered that case in depth, already 88 episodes in our archive. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So, returning to the affidavit, we know that Murphy absolutely knew something was wrong, and the loyal, intelligent pup barked to alert the others in the house so loudly and so consistently, the audio of the dog's barking was actually picked up on a Ring doorbell camera 50 feet away, outside the house. Bear in mind, Murphy was even further away from that camera on the top floor, above Xana's room, right, than Xana's room. Murphy was closer to D than Murphy was to that camera. So going back to the affidavit, at about 4:17 a.m., a security camera located at 1112 King Road, a residence immediately to the northwest of 1122 King Road, I would prefer just to say diagonally across the parking lot. Anyway, picked up directly diagonally across the parking lot, picked up distorted audio, what sounded like voices or a whimper followed by a loud thud. And a dog can also be heard barking numerous times starting at 4:17 a.m. Right? So it's saying that these sounds, voices, a whimper, a loud thud, and a dog barking can all be heard at the same time. So Murphy is very much kind of an active participant, an active player, character inside this crime scene that is playing out. He is one of the three survivors. There aren't just two survivors, there are three, and he also has a close call. He also sees the perpetrator. He also smells and hears the perpetrator. And possibly the perpetrator even touches him, handles him in some way. Now consider this from Murphy's perspective. He's got sharper auditory perception, right? So he would likely also have heard far more than what Dee heard, and perhaps even felt vibrations through the floor, all that creaking, all the noises, but even the more subtle sounds, the whimpers, what is actually going on with those sounds? What did those sounds sound like to him? Did it sound like humans in distress, these humans that he'd gotten to know so well over at least a year? And all of that's going on immediately below him, and even to the side of him. And this may have prompted him to commence barking loudly at 4:17 a.m. In other words, Murphy did his job. Murphy tried to communicate that something was wrong and that there was a danger, and there was a danger. That someone was in the house that shouldn't be, and perhaps he could sort of immediately say, I don't recognize the smell. This is strange. And so wasn't he essentially calling for help while the murders were taking place? It was his way of calling 911. In other words, he was a lot quicker at alerting than Dee, who would need several more hours to ask for help. She'd also need to consult with others. All that Murphy did was he barked. He did his job. It's also becoming clearer that the perpetrator botched his own attack so badly that he abandoned the crime scene prematurely. And I'm still not sure if I believe that he simply walked out. I wouldn't be surprised if he trotted or ran out. But in any event, if he did stride past one of the survivors, right, who turned out to be a key witness, and fortunately he did. Fortunately, he went past her and continued on to the exit, and then from there to his waiting white vehicle parked outside. But didn't that barking, wasn't that sort of like almost a alarm going off, a house alarm going off? And didn't that barking do its job? It did wake up the people inside the house, and that made it harder for the perpetrator to commit these surprise attacks. They weren't that surprising. They weren't sleeping in their beds thanks to Murphy. You know, the media reported that all four were attacked in their sleep. And I think it's quite possible that none of the four were actually fast asleep when the perpetrator attacked. Why? Thanks to Murphy. So can you see the unexpected encounter with the dog may be why the flustered killer firstly lost track of the knife sheath? That may be due to the dog as well. And then secondly, once the dog made noises and started barking, which began to waken the others in the house, the killer now had to take on aroused, awakened, and alerted targets who would now be able to fight back and are somewhat, they are able to respond and react and adapt to what they're seeing. They're not limp and unconscious, and they're actually awake, and now they can defend themselves. And when that happened, the killer was totally unnerved, and he literally ran out of his own nefarious dark fantasy. The thing that he'd been thinking about, plotting, planning, while he was stalking. This thing that he was looking forward to for so long, he ends up running out of it like a coward. Not a very, not the exit of some sort of powerful, scary killer. This person that he was trying to, traumatize or haunt or torture or taunt Moscow, ends up being this pathetic loser. He had this fantasy starring himself as some evil avenging angel, and this puppy basically chases him out of his own dark fantasy. A puppy. And if you can take it further than that, had Dee or Kaylee or Xana or Ethan not been so used to ignoring noise, had just one of them, it's almost like in the Alec Baldwin case, had Halls or Hannah Gutierrez Reed or Baldwin, and one of them just checked that weapon properly, disaster could have been avoided. In this case, had just one of those kids who had been awakened made sure what it was about. Dee, who got up 3 times. Kaylee, who said, I think there's someone in the house. Xana or Ethan, who were probably to some extent not quite asleep anyway. What did they make of the noises upstairs? In any event, had they not been so used to not only ignoring noise, but sort of being dismissive of it and making it someone else's responsibility? Instead, had they reacted to it, one extra person's life may have been saved. 2 extra people's lives may have been saved. Half of the victims could have been saved. Even 3 people's lives could have been saved, thanks to Murphy foiling the killer's theoretical, but as it turned out, entirely too academic murder plan. And you could even have a situation where, had Dee reacted very, very quickly and screamed, right, before anything had happened, had Kaylee reacted very, very quickly and perhaps closed the door. It's easy to say in hindsight. But if there was more of a sense of acting in response to this unfamiliar noise, rather than this almost programmed response to tend to just let sleeping dogs lie in that sense, just allow noises to take place, and then someone else will deal with it. It could actually have saved all 4 lives. This dog could have saved all 4 of their lives. And now, look where we are now, in a sign that Murphy is quickly turning into an unlikely hero, and I think it's about time that he did. In this tragic story, Kaylee's ex, Jack, has recently launched an Instagram account dedicated to Murphy. When I last looked at it, it had just 8 posts, but almost 80,000 followers. Final comment. The suspect in this case has been credited with being really smart, really intelligent, being a PhD candidate. While the dog in the story is descended from the top 5 smartest dogs out of 150 dog breeds. And it seems the dog's intellect, that this dog did actually outsmart and ultimately chase off the vegan killer suspected of having committed these crimes. Not only, in other words, a PhD criminology student was actually frustrated in trying to commit the perfect murder by a puppy. Not only that, if one of Murphy's hairs did tag along with the killer back to his apartment, then it really is a case of Murphy's Law. How about that? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.